Hello everyone, this is Lala, and today I'm going to be talking about Battle of the Eras, which is the final season that has aired as I'm recording this, and this means that I am finished my review slash recap slash retrospective of all of the flagship challenge seasons. So, first I have to talk about the cast, where I think on paper, Battle of the Eras is a good idea when it comes to the cast, splitting up all 40 seasons or 39 seasons into 4 eras, with the first 10 being Era 1, the next 10 being Era 2, the next 10 being Era 3, and the last 9 technically being Era 4, where you get the best of the best to take part in the season, but you start to see some of the flaws with that. I do think Era 1 for the most part is stacked, though there are a few very notable people who will just never come back. On Era 2, especially on the men side, it was very disappointing. Obviously, Banana is the most known person from the challenge, was always going to be on, and Nehemiah arguably deserves a top 5 spot, especially when it comes to All Stars. But looking at the other three, i.e., Orion, Derek, and Brandon, who were never really good competitors and didn't make that big of a mark, their spots definitely felt undeserving, especially when it comes to some of the other era 2 men who could have been on, like a Wes, even a Kenny and Evan, though they are rightfully not on the show anymore. And it just caused Era 2 to kind of be flat. Though, when you look at the Era 2 women, all of them but Aviv, who was also in a placement for Melinda, but even Melinda wasn't the best choice, fit, where Maria, Laurel, Emily, and Kellyanne are all strong competitors who made their mark. Though it would have been nice to have seen someone like Paula or a Sarah, but it's clear that they're just not coming back. Era 3 is also a pretty disappointing cast, at least when it comes to the women, as Avery and Naya barely did any seasons on the flagship or overall, and didn't have much impact compared to many of the other Era 3 women who could have been on, like a Nani or a Jenna, or especially an Ashley. Heck, there's even some others who did more seasons who would have been more notable than an Avery and Anaya. Though I do think that the men for Every 3 was pretty good, though Zach was definitely a very large snub. Even with Era 4, I had some questionable people, since obviously Fessel and Jay made huge impacts on the season, and Callan, someone who only did one flagship season beforehand, which was the most recent one, definitely didn't really belong, and I don't think we needed him and Horacio there. And with the women, having, I think, hold on, most of them being from late Era 4, i.e., Nerys, Michelle, and Olivia just felt off, and someone like an Amber was definitely stopped as well. Despite that, it definitely gave a lot of nostalgia that the last several seasons were missing, and seeing all these different groups of people interact was fun. Though I do think that 40 people is just way too much. I didn't like the Era Invitational, especially where some of the more interesting people were cut right away, though I get why they cut the cast or a fifth of the cast right away just due to money concerns, but it also kind of just led to a lot of the more boring people making it further into the season. The targeting thing was nice on paper, where you go into elimination, you win, and he gets to target people who put you into elimination to begin with. But it was a bit flawed since one, you only got to see the targets throughout the episodes where almost everyone else was invisible for the most part. And obviously, you had a lot of the cast volunteering to go into elimination, which kind of took the fun out of a lot of it. Despite that, I do think the first half of the season was pretty good. We had a lot of solid, memorable moments, and it was entertaining enough. Though, I think they should have ended the target twists in the individual portion, which definitely made that period a lot weaker, in my opinion, though there's still a few decent moments there as well. The karma twist absolutely sucked, and it definitely took away a lot of the end result. And you're actively encouraging your cast to be nicer and to not cause any conflict, which makes for a more boring experience. Especially if people are anticipating something like the voting or karma twist to be implemented into future seasons. Overall, I think the season's fine enough. Definitely not as strong as they probably hoped that it would be once it started or once it is in production, but it's far from the worst. So I'm skipping episode 0 since I don't think it set up a whole lot, and the cast was really in the house for almost 2 weeks, though they edited that down here. The cast arrives at their first challenge, where they are divided into 4 eras, with season 1 to 10 being era 1, 11 to 19 being 11 to 20 being era 2, 21 to 30 being era 3, and 31 to 39 being era 4. CT is getting emotional for being a part of the season, and I think it's his 20th season or something along the lines of that, and the winner will get $1 million. Era Invitational is the first part of the season where almost half of them will be in an elimination this round, where a man and a woman will go home from each era during this round. And Light Up is the daily where they have to race to a puzzle, get to the shoreline to get to a boat, get to their buoys, where each having to get 10 of them, and then they have to plug it into a wall. The first man and woman from each era will win immunity, and the last man and woman from each era will automatically go into elimination, where the winner chooses the other opponent. I'm not getting into the order of all of it, and I do think that the daily was pretty good. But TT and Rachel win for Era 1, Laura and Bananas win for Era 2, Tori and Corey win for Era 3, and Michelle and Horacio win for Era 4. As for the losers, Mark and Katie are going into elimination for Era 1. Kellyanne and Ryan are going into elimination for Era 2. Lua and I are going into elimination for Era 3. And Theo and Reese are going into elimination for Era 4. So I get why they decided to do a slaughter here, since paying 40 people, and most of them are already having a high enough appearance fee, but most of them lasting long will just make them have to get paid more overall. So they save money by killing a lot of them right off the bat. There's a lot of talk about what happened last season, though it really goes nowhere with Era 4. Leora and Cam just had another kid like a few days before the season started. Casey is now engaged. Avery is dating Adam, which we will talk about when I get to All Stars 4. Braden has kid, though he got divorced, I believe. CT is giving out a bunch of CT pro tips, which I feel like they did to give him some sort of content this season. Laurel just beat out Carmaria out of everyone, so their rivalry is still a thing here as well. Michelle and Olivia are still allies, so Michelle wants to protect her as much as possible. Nerys is snippy over getting last, even when her boyfriend is trying to help her get into good spirits. Katie is a crying mess on the bones, and Polly really has me fucked up by his confessional outfit, which is the worst one that I may have ever seen in my entire life within reality TV overall. And now, being bi doesn't mean you have to dress horribly, and many bi men pull off whatever he's trying to do off better than what he dressed as here. Anissa feels safe because she and Rachel are friends, and they licked boxes or rubbed boxes 20 years ago. But we all know this won't go well. Devin is shading Leeway for playing a shady game. I wouldn't be shocked if Devin might have recorded this confessional while filming All Stars 5, grabbing the same confessional look just to justify their paying for that season. The 4 eras have to go into deliberations. Ryan and Derek talk about Ryan hating Laurel now because he took Nicole's side when she cheated with Jack's sister at Jack's own wedding, and Jack's sister being married, and Evie feels like she's in danger since she really knows no one from her era. Amanda thinks that she and Corey will be working together since they are both friends with Nelson, so he needs to protect her since Tori hates her. Polly is complaining about Maria not campaigning to Bananas, but she should be safe since she's one of the strongest women there, and Kellyanne wants to open a sanctuary for dogs, so this is her goal. I'm also kind of sure that she did this for the check to, for her getting married soon after this. CT and Daryl are joking around about being old men who will get injured and aren't in their 20s anymore. Olivia and Thea are flirting hardcore with one another off the bat, and most of Era 1 is asleep, where most of the other 3 eras are hanging out in the back during the night. Tony is campaigning to Corey, and they both want to be new winners, so Tori is trying to argue for Jordan going in, which was not going to happen with Tori being the other decision maker, and Corey isn't over past the gate from 6 years ago, clearly. Horacio tells Nerys that he and Michelle will give her whomever she wants as an opponent, and Nerys wants Jenny if it's a puzzle, and Olivia if it's a headbanger, where Bananas mentions that being in a couple on the show isn't a good thing, since they are going against one another. Josh tells Jenny and Theo that Polly He needs to go in since he will work with Kylan, Horacio, and Nerys against them. And Theo's still not over Polly kissing him 5 years ago and throwing him into several eliminations on War of the Worlds too. Leroy is talking about his daughter being born 2 weeks ago to Laura and Casey, and CT speaks to Derek about how he wants Derek and Darrell at the end, but Darrell got fourth, so he should go in, but Brett got second out of the Era 1 men, but he studies closest to the others. Mark talks to everyone on the Era a lot, so they're not happy with having to choose one another, and Derek is thinking about wanting to go into elimination, though I do think part of this was so he would be on the show, and so he could have that moment, especially, to be honest. We get to the deliberations where Era 1 is sad about having to nominate someone, where Derek volunteers to go into elimination, and Anissa does not want to go in, but she sees it coming since CT apparently always throws her in, and Rachel is leaving her hanging here. Aviv and Carmaria make the cases, and Brennan is essentially a dead man walking. Apparently, he and Ryan got heated here that really wasn't shown. Amanda and Tori go back and forth about their beef, Avery makes her case, and Tony goes hard in his campaign against Jordan. Nerys wants to go against Olivia, though they already made up in the house by this point, because she's the easiest choice, and Amanda brings up Nelson. Polly decides to pick a fight with Theo, who has been campaigning to go in against him, and this ends up with them arguing about Polly being untrustworthy due to the Bananas voting situation on War of the Worlds 2 and promising otherwise, and Polly mentions that he did that because Bananas plotted for Carmaria to get thrown in, and Theo knew that Bananas and Laura were throwing the challenge. It's also ridiculous, but they want to go against one another, and the later Era 4 people are acting like this is the most tense thing ever, since I guess they're not used to people arguing like this when they were on the show. So now we're getting into the aftermath of the deliberations, where the nominations are pretty much firm at this point. Amanda snaps at Corey for promising on Nelson, and they talked about it on bed or on one of their beds, but Corey doesn't give much of an explanation, where she says that she will throw challenges to make sure that he will go home, and he tells her that she needs to better put that work in the sand. Apparently, the real reason was that Naya begged Corey to not sit in Avery, outside of Corey being gung ho about Amanda, and he was actually working with Naya in the season. Tony is complaining about being at the bottom while doing well in the challenge, so he feels like he shouldn't be nominated. Anissa is pissed off at Rachel for throwing her in, and they are arguing where sending in Jodie would have ruined the team, or at least in Rachel's eyes, and Tori is also there because, of course, she's supporting her friend Anissa. And of course, they have an emotional hug because Anissa might go home. Cara Maria and Polly make a scene about her being nominated, and they're literally yelling at Bananas, who is in the upper floor, almost like a Romeo and Juliet situation, where Bananas mentions that Polly spoke to him, but not Cara Maria. And she's bored slash disappointed about always being put in, and he's pissed that she beat him in the opening challenge. Killian has a dodo edit, since she does not want to go against her friend Cara Maria, and a sidekick gave her bad luck this season. While Cara Maria and Polly are speaking, Michelle tells him that it was her choice to send him in due to the tension between him and Theo, and Polly is lying about going to 3 finals. Hold on. He was purged right before the final on War of the Worlds 1. No one can say that they won a finalist on War of the Worlds 1, which he also got purged in that challenge. So this is just an example of Polly just bolstering himself up with verifiable lies. Anyways, Michelle is fighting for Olivia to not go in, but Horacio is insistent. But they want to move on from all of this, and Luis is begging Horacio to make her a wife, which is just so cringe-worthy that they actually put on this and that she said it, with more commentary about them self-isolating from everyone else. And then we have CT giving Carmaria a pep talk before the elimination. So it's really boring to have one episode mainly just consist of 8 eliminations, and I get why they tried it here, but it's a failure and they shouldn't do it again. The fans voted for the pole whistle, take shelter, balls in, and hall brawl to be in the eliminations for this season. And I said it in the order that the eras are playing in it, though I'm pretty sure the fans didn't want these eliminations all in the very first round. Anyways, Anissa and Derek are nominated, Brandon and Camaria are nominated, Amanda and Tony are nominated, and Polly and Olivia are nominated. Amanda and Tori are chipping at one another during Tori's speech, which is full of shit, so I do agree with Amanda about this. They play in the order of the eliminations that were introduced in the show, so Era 3 is playing first. Nia, of course, wins balls in against Amanda, but the fact that the latter got a point and it makes it look like a weaker win for Nia. Tony puts in that work on Leroy and demolishes him in the elimination. And I think Leroy said that he was focusing more on triathlon running when it comes to his training, and Tony has actually built up a lot in recent years. For some reason, Tony is salty that Bananas is cheering for Leroy when everyone knows that Leroy is one of Johnny's actual friends from the show. And I think Bananas is like the godson of Leroy's children or something, or they call him Uncle. Josh and Karen are very attracted to Nia, which will be a thing for the next few episodes. Darren is happy that Leroy is gone due to his cutthroat gameplay on Double Agents. Era 1 is next, where Derek and Mark do the elimination, and Mark is a wrestler as of recently, so it's clear that he's doing some flips and stuff for a show, but Derek does end up beating Mark. Honestly, this could have been thrown, which sounds like Mark, but some people mentioned that he confirmed this somewhere, but I couldn't find anything, but who knows. It's clear that Derek needed this more since his wife was about to give birth while this was filming, and Mark talks about his mother going through stage 4 cancer for the last 5 years, which he's mentioned a few times on All Stars. Anita, of course, beats Katie, and she was the first woman to do the pole wrestle, which I honestly forgot about. Actually, no, I don't even think she was the first. I think Robin was the first one who did it on the duel, but whatever. But Katie fought harder than people thought, and the cast was talking about Anissa ripping it out of her hand immediately, and that didn't happen. Era 4 is playing next, and Theo and Polly are playing Hardball, where Theo demolishes him in both rounds. Polly mentioned that he got 2 concussions from this, and I'm shocked they didn't DQ him, since I remember them DQing Jay and a few others due to similar injuries, and it looks like Theo almost stepped on him a few times. Not the physical contact that Polly probably wanted, but yeah, this is easily the most brutal hall brawl ever on the show. And I do think that this specific elimination was one of the reasons why they stopped with the physical eliminations for the rest of the season. And a lot of the Era 1 people didn't want to do stuff like Hall Brawl. Olivia is turned on, but we move on to her and Reese running past one another in the first round. So they won't enter one another, and everyone is essentially clowning them. When they actually do have the summit clash, Olivia does beat Nerys, where Horacio is obviously not happy with it, but most of the team is glad that the drama is out. The final round is Era 2, where both pairs are competing at the same time in Take Shelter. Brandon is pissed off that he had the only non-physical elimination, where he would have easily demolished Ryan in the other ones. I'm overhearing about Polly and Kara tying one another, or him tying her in their sex lives, and he's yelling at her to do what she needs to do in the elimination, with Bananas, of course, yelling, Bananas and Laurel yelling at Kellyanne, and TT's also helping Carmaria. But she does win against Kellyanne, and Ryan wins against Brandon. The 8 eliminated players are told about the karma points, which will affect whomever is in the finals, and I don't know why they're trying to make the show actively nicer. And we do see them voting in their final confessionals, though they never show it consistently throughout the season, which is just very annoying. Mark coming back to the flagship was clearly solely due to this season being a special thing, but apparently he got really sick as soon as they arrived there, so if he did throw the elimination, I do understand why he did it this time. I predict that he will do a few more All-Star seasons before officially retiring. There was a joke about Katie doing this for the vacation, and her being the first boot here really isn't surprising, though she does do All-Stars Rivals like 2 months after this, where hopefully she does better there. Brandon's easily the most forgettable person on the season, and there's really no content for him. I would be fine if he doesn't come back at all, but it's clear that his time on the official flagship and maybe All Stars is done, since he was disappointing on All Stars 4 there and obviously this season. Kellyanne admitted that she was checked out of the season and was hoping that she would get inspired, but she didn't. I'm assuming that she did this in All Stars Rivals mainly for the appearance check, since weddings are very expensive. I don't know if Leroy mainly did this for an appearance fee, but it seems like the Chauncey thing happened to him as well. But Parenthood is expensive, so I'm not shocked that he did All Stars Rivals right after this. It is a shame that Amanda didn't do well in the season, since she's always a source of drama, but I'm honestly tired of the Tori stuff, and her stuff just really isn't working anymore, as this is the second season that she performed really poorly on. Honestly, she should have rejected the season and done All Stars Rivals, where most of her allies are on the season. Polly getting wrecked was definitely a memorable moment, and I think it's the main thing that's going to be remembered from the Era Invitational, and a part of you does feel bad for him. While he is more normal than his last one. It is a shame that he left since he's more interesting and drama-centric than any of the other Era 4 men, but I also think he would have done better on All Stars Rivals, due to who was also on there. I don't know if he really has a place on the show anymore. I am glad that Nerys made up with Olivia and moved on from that mess of last season, but Era 4 did get more boring without her, and I did wish she stayed through. At the same time, it does show her weaknesses with the physical elements of the show, but with flopping here and her rant about the Horacio stuff, it seems like the show is punishing her, so we might not see her for a while, if not ever, but it really depends. Everyone is wondering why the eliminated cast was held back. Tony feels great about beating Leroy, who he thought would be a lot stronger, and Carmaria complains to Rachel about how rotten Laurel is, and she's obviously sad that Polly is gone. Michelle comforts Horacio about Nerys being gone since they need to be a unit. Doral and Aviv, former partners from Fresh Meat 1, are talking as she is nervous about doing this after 18 years after being a mother, wife, and doing it for herself. And he wants to win to be an all-time great with Bananas, CT, and Jordan, so he clearly doesn't see himself as on their level. Emily and Brad are having sex in the showers. One thing Brad's going to do post-divorce is fuck on the challenge. And we have Josh and Naya making out in the pool. So a man and a woman need to volunteer, which is Jody and Darrell, and Issa refuses to volunteer. Derek and Aviv, Tony and Avery, and Casey and Kynan. They get to their second challenge, Gladiator, where they have to go on a boat to row and then eat gross Vietnamese food. And then they have to put the shield of every season in order. I do enjoy this daily a lot, and Era 1 is a complete mess, with Brad and CT failing to roll properly and Era 3 dominating from beginning to end, where they win the daily, and Era 1 is obviously last, and due to this, Darrell and Jody are automatically an elimination. So, the captain of the team that loses is automatically in the elimination. The captain of the team that wins gets to choose which of the other two opponents gets to go into elimination, and they are immune. So I don't really like this, but I think the volunteer thing was done, so it would be easy to edit the episodes since they can focus mainly on 8 people per episode and the rest can easily be ignored. And they would feel like they're focusing on the main things regarding the narrative. Josh speaks to Tony about Era 3 and 4 working together, and Naya is giving every advice and is supporting her. Casey is telling Olivia that she wants to work with Era 3 because she knows most of the people from Era 3 compared to the other two eras. Tony is fine with targeting Era 2 and voting to keep Era 4, and Tori still wants to work with the Vacation Alliance since they are friends and allies. Though Tori has a lot of friends. Derek pitches to Avery about not sending him in since they are friends. The teams go into deliberation and she does not have many connections, so she's not picking Derek and Aviv. Callan makes his pitch and Avery cuts him off, who states that Casey keeps her word, that's what Callan is mentioning, where she says that they don't have a deal, and Darrell wants to go against Aviv and Derek, which shocks Aviv, but Callan already kicked his ass last season, so I get why Darrell doesn't want to go with Era 4 here. After the other teams leave, Avery says that she is not sitting in Derek, and it's time to keep Aviv. Sorry, not Aviv. Casey and Cannon, though Tony wants to work with Era 4, since this will carry him or them to the second half of the game. They are arguing and are more than fine with going down into the sand, where both of them tell their sides to the others. So now they're at a stalemate, and everyone thinks that this is really, really, really dumb. Corey thinks that it makes no sense why Tony wants to go in since at least Derek and Avery live together, which I found very interesting and shocking that neither one of them mentioned, but it's making Era 3 weaker overall. There is a toga party and they are pushing this feminism angle with Laurel, Jenny, Avery, and Derek, and Johnny thinks that it is dumb that Tony wants to go in since standing up to Avery is not as important, though Tony doesn't see Bananas as an ally due to rooting for Leroy. This is stupid. And I do think it's kind of ironic that they're pushing this feminism angle, which I do find it's very ironic based on the people Avery has dated not having the best record with this. With obviously Johnny Riley showing his complete ass in this, and Adam's main season, The Gauntlet, involved him wanting to target the women because he saw them as weaker. And of course, Ryan is also pushing this sexism narrative, though I don't think that's why Tony did what he did. So Avery standing up to herself is seen as important, with other people like Jenny also pushing this. And Kylan is pitching to Nia that she's tired of them talking games, though, so they end up hooking up, where Theo and Olivia and David and Michelle are hooking up too. A lot of the cast is joking about the hookup, and Tori jokes about Josh, where he overhears it. He wakes up and calls her out about making fun of him, despite her being one of his best friends. And she knows that she screwed up with him on USA 2, where she essentially caused him to go home, where he tells her that he doesn't want to be friends with her anymore, causing her to be an emotional mess, and she doesn't appreciate being spoken to like this. This is really a nothing burger. So essentially, I don't think this was a sexism thing from Tony's end, and I think he just wants to scare every internet going in so he could get his way. And I also think Avery was so insistent on this. I don't know when they flew out and went in episodes of All Stars 4 air, but I do know that the season was airing while the season was filming, so she could have very well seen the flack that she was getting, but getting dragged for playing a scared game on that season. But there's no stars on this season. There's no point in her doing this. It is time for the elimination, and Tony and Avery are at a stalemate, so they do go into elimination against Darrell and Jody, where of course Erethy is pissed off about this, rightfully so. Avery mentions that she does not think Tony wants to be there, and that they're going back and forth about this at the elimination, since he told everyone about his reasons for being there, but they compete in their eliminations individually. The elimination is one step at a time, where they have to read the instructions to put the tiles in a specific order to finish. The men compete first, and many people are on the sidelines talking about how Tony isn't trying, is losing on purpose, how he's an actor, and how he wants to go home. And Darrell enters his back, which will affect him in the future. But Darrell ends up beating Tony, where he literally admitted that he was going to let the cast help him, since he had no idea what he was doing. The women compete, and there's some audience help. I don't know how much it helped with this case, but Avery does end up beating Jodie, where she's doing it for her stepchildren. This is interesting since Avery and Adam aren't married. Darrell and Avery have to choose the target of the other gender, which will be a thing throughout the rest of the season, where Derek and Anissa, Laurel and Bananas, Jordan and Naya, and Jenny and Horacio are seen as targets. I don't know if Tony did this season for the appearance check, but if he did, why didn't he just lose to Leroy? Either way, with his suspicious leave on All Stars 4 and now this, I don't think production trusts him much. And it sucks that this happened since he was very entertaining on this season, and the fact that they aired the commentary about people claiming that he wanted to go home when they've hidden stuff like this from other cast members who did go home in a similar way really isn't a good look. So I wouldn't be shocked if he doesn't come back after this. Jodie didn't have much to do in the season, but it's just clear that the flagship show really isn't for her. I do think her going here definitely weakened Era 1, but she also got booted around her birthday, which sucks. Maybe she'll be on an all-star season, but I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Laurel and Bananas know that the others wants to get them out, and everyone is reacting to the target twist, where Laurel is really pissed off about Dara picking her as a target. Era 3 is feeling very confident with the team, and they come up with a volunteering rotation plan. Jenny and Anissa are talking about the pressures of women and people's expectations of their bodies, and Anissa's glad to finally make it to the final. And she's been training since her surgery after Ride or Dies. Clearly, both she and Jenny are going into elimination from the inclusion of this scene. Tori speaks to Josh, and they end up making up, which we all predicted, as they're still working with Devin, Casey, and Anissa a la the Vacation Alliance. Horacio is still not in the best place mentally, and is essentially playing for Kynan, which is just very weird, and it says a lot about how little he cared about this after Nerys was gone. So the daily is Cradle Cranium, where they are answering trivia challenges 30 feet above the water in a cradling position, and the most members win. And if there's a tie, there will be a tiebreaker. It's a fine enough trivia challenge, but not the most notable, and it's not shocking that Era 2 and Era 3 did the best in this, because the Era 1 people most likely didn't watch recent seasons, and the Era 4 people most likely didn't watch the seasons that they weren't on before they joined. So Era 2 and Era 3 had the best chance of watching seasons that they weren't on and also playing in a lot of the seasons as well. CT ends up hurting his back as he lands in the water. Era 4 gets last place in the daily officially, and it looks like Jordan threw the challenge to Laurel from the edit, though he was on a rant online about how untrue the edit was when the episode aired. And people are feeling away since Jordan was there for Cheyenne's gender reveal, so Jordan knew Corey's name, and that was one of the questions that TJ asked him. Laurel says, "Fuck you, Darrell," for her being safe and him targeting her, and he tells her to "fuck you too." He calls her a thick ass bully. She does some weird black sense to me, in my opinion, and she says, "You look stupid. You look stupid." It's just very odd. And she says that he kept Emily safe from being a target because she gives him good massages, essentially insinuating infidelity. Derek does a video call with his pregnant wife, and CT comes back into the house from the hospital, and Bananas is fine with either Jordan or Bananas going home. Sorry, Jordan or I don't know who the other person was, but Bananas is fine with Jordan going home at this point, where Jordan is expecting for him and Bananas to keep the peace between one another. And Jordan is giving Knight advice on how to campaign to Bananas, and Jordan and Bananas have a mutual relationship when it comes to how they play the game in recent seasons. Corey and Devin are talking about Jordan knowing Cheyenne's name, and they're assuming that Jordan has a deal with Era too. Emily and Brad are having a date on the rooftop where people like Avery are jealous, and the cast is kind of cheering the couples or the meditators on, or whatever. Anissa and Derek are hoping that them knowing Bananas for almost 2 decades will mean more to keep them safe, but Bananas knows that Laura is the decision maker, and there's no way that she's sending in her ex. Horacio speaks to Laura and is hoping to use their closeness to his benefit, where he wants to run a final with Jordan, who he sees as the best, so he wants to go against Derek in the elimination. Derek writes a whole list, and he, CT, and Daryl are talking about how old they are. Era 2 has a meeting where Nehemiah is trying to have team unity, but it's not doing anything, where Laura remembers Jordan targeting Michelle and Jay to get revenge for her on Ride or Dice after her elimination, so there's no other option, and Ryan should talk Laura in the confessionals, which is something that he does a lot in the season. Derek brings his entire list to the deliberation, but it really doesn't amount to anything. Era 4 talks about the picking targets thing, especially if Janie wins the elimination, where Josh volunteers himself to be a target, where she has the feeling that she will be targeted right afterwards, no matter what. We get to the elimination, and Bananas and Laurel send in Dirk and Anissa, where they play Pick It Up, where they have to reach a basket to throw it in the trap, and then pick up Jax before picking up or catching the ball as it falls to the ground, and placing the Jax into the wall. This elimination was decent, but there was a lot of technical issues that has me thinking less of it. Jenna's asthma makes the elimination relatively close, where she does take a break so she can catch her breath, but Jenny does beat Anissa, and Horacio and Derek complete the round at the exact same time, where some of Derek's checks weren't on the boards, though apparently that was allowed. And there was some other mess that happened. They checked the tapes and it was determined that Horacio lost to Derek, but he felt like there was some production shenanigans, which caused him to leave with a very bad taste in his mouth. Jenny and Derek chooses Tina and CT as they essentially volunteer. Emily volunteers, and Nehemiah is chosen. Devin and Tori are chosen, though Corey was supposed to volunteer here. And Olivia volunteers, and Callan is also chosen, though Josh was supposed to volunteer here. And Callan is rightfully pissed off at Josh. Essentially, Corey and Josh back out because CT was a target and they didn't want the smoke. And apparently, CT only volunteered here because he heard that Josh was going to be a target, and Rachel told Josh this, which is why Josh backed out. This is the earliest Anissa has been booted in a while since, I think, Rivals 1, which is refreshing. There's some of the same entitlement about how she should have been saved, but I'm glad that we get somewhat of a break from her. But we all know that this will be far from the last that we see of her on the show. Horacio clearly isn't meant for the game and the show. He was supposedly isolating himself with Nerys and lost his focus when she left as well. And while I did think the elimination was suspicious, the producers showing him and Derek the tapes and him taking the loss so hard just shows that he really isn't meant for the game, and there's nothing there outside of competition, as he has a very boring personality, he's not going to politic, he's not going to show much personality or have much fun. Him retiring is for the best regarding himself and the show, but we will see if it's a permanent thing. CT is sure that he will crush the eliminations just like everyone in his era thinks that, and Nehemiah, no, sorry, everyone in his era so far crushing it in the air eliminations, which isn't true since Jody and Anissa just went home. Anyways, and Nehemiah knows that he needs to stay out of the elimination since CT sent him out on Rivals 1, and the fact that they're mentioning this clearly meant that they're going to face one another again. Era 4, mainly Olivia and Kenan, kind of confronts Josh for backing out on volunteering to be a target, and Josh talks around it, though he's literally just scared of going against CT, and at least he admits it. Brad is annoyed that Emily sacrificed herself since she doesn't have many relationships in her team, but she thinks that it is her turn. But we have the cast partying in the daylight, and Tina feels safe because CT is the target and he always wins. Laurel is willing to get out all of her threats before the final, and there's a lot of tension between herself and Carmaria. Devin and Michelle are a thing, and they're getting very close, where Derek points out that they're going to have sex, essentially, where this is the first season Michelle has played with a single Devin. Nehemiah tries to make a deal with Devin, especially since he and Emily has not done the flagship show in a decade, but Devin essentially rejects it because he doesn't wants to over-promise with long-term deals that he might have to back out of, and the deal doesn't involve Tori. Josh talks about the vacation lines and how the internet roasts them, where many people in and out of it confirms that it is a thing, though Janae doesn't trust the alliance, so she does not want to volunteer, though it is her turn. The daily is Fast Pass, where they have to pick a Y-shaped beam through the forest, and they have to grab sandbags to bring them back. And then they have to balance it on a teeter-totter. Tina and CT are arguing throughout the challenge, despite her being a target, and it ends up with the Bob and Weave, bitch! Bob and motherfucking Weave! Argument. Laurel is not trying hard in the daily since she wants Emily gone, and the daily is fun enough. Era 4 wins the daily, and Era 1 is in last place yet again. CT and Tina make up right away, and they're both mad because they're going into the elimination. It is clear that Nehemiah is going in, since this is the first time he's getting screen time in the season, and CT and Tina refuses the campaign, since they want Era 4 to make the choice and to get the blood on their hands, essentially. We learn that Corey and Nehemiah are becoming allies, which is nice since Corey doesn't trust anyone and Nehemiah doesn't have much allies. I did hear that he was aligned with the likes of Anaya, Avery, Corey, Camaria, Aviv, Derek, and Ryan, but due to the target's twist, it really didn't amount to anything. At the deliberation, Devin completely throws Nehemiah under the bus, and Nehemiah is trying to defend himself well, but it doesn't go very well, and Emily is pissed off because Nehemiah made this deal without her. Kyle is shocked at the information, and Nehemiah essentially dug his own grave. Emily reports back to Era 2 and 1 about Era 3 and 4 being aligned, so now Rachel is activated. Remember this for a few rounds from now. Michelle is talking about her love for Devin, and Laurel enters the room to throw stuff at people and takes what she threw back from Michelle. Michelle and Laura are hashing out their issues from Ride or Dies, and Laura is drained from the conversation. And Michelle is tired of trying to make a friendship with her. And Laura mentions that Michelle nominated and targeted her, and she needs to stop the battle, where it is one-sided in Michelle's perception of her. Michelle is giving up on trying to move on from Laura, and Carmaria enters the room to eavesdrop, mentioning that she'll be Michelle's friend after this. Laura is really annoyed that Carmaria intervened, and Carmaria is dyeing her hair as she reports it back to Emily, where the latter is annoyed with Laura too. Carmaria mentions that Laura was going to try a news and doesn't like Emily because she's insecure, and Laura has no more power over her. Jonay is trying to get out of nominating herself as she's being pressured to self-nominated, as she does not want to go home because she self-nominated, where CT thinks that Jonay is doing way too much. I wish they showed more of her messiness and her dysfunction with Era 3 on the episodes. Laurel and Camaria get into an argument where they call one another the problem and are pointing fingers at one another, blaming that if you point one finger, more is being pointed at you. And Camaria is yelling that Laurel and Carmaria are yelling at one another about how the two of them don't fuck with one another, how both are so unself-aware and miserable, and they both call one another manipulative, and this is a choppy fight that apparently lasted for over 2 hours. Laura tells Carmaria to sit down, you stupid bitch, and there's another choppy segment where the house is running to them, so some Val stuff was clearly being said. Laura mentions that Polly gaslights her, and I'm assuming this is around the time where Laura allegedly mentioned Carmaria's toxic relationship with Abram, and Laura tried to help her out, where it got too far. But they couldn't show it due to legal reasons. Carmaria mentions that she had Laura's back with All Stars 4, with Nicole essentially playing Laura, and Laura thinks that this is all about her beating Carmaria on that season, which just shows her poor perception of things. The fact that the security in the entire house had to get involved showed how nasty and horrible this really was, and Carmira is a mess. Apparently, she had to leave for a few days, and security had to follow her around for a bit, and they were both offered therapists. Anyways, this is messy as hell. Laurel knows that she's going to get blamed for it, and she's ranting to Thea and Callan about how she's going to be blamed for everything and made to look like the bad guy, where Callan is essentially siding with Laurel here. Emily sages and does some yoga stuff around the house to calm herself down. Emily and Nehemiah are obviously nominated, where we get to the elimination getting hammered, where they have to dig out 100 nails from the board and then nail it back, where they then have to hit the button. Tina's nails completely fly off the board. Apparently, her husband is in construction, and some mention that the boards were faulty as hell, and she beats Emily. And Nehemiah gets his revenge. Not really revenge, but makes up for the elimination round on Rivals 1, where he beats CT here. Brad volunteers, and there's no one else but Derek. As there's no one else but Derek, that's an option with Laurel and Bananas being nominated. Corey volunteers. Janae doesn't volunteer, but she gets chosen anyways by Nehemiah, but she is shocked that he chose her. And Jenny and Josh are nominated as targets, where Josh does volunteer this time. Apparently, CT was somewhat checked out of the season since he's planning on doing Worst Cooks in America soon after this, so part of him allegedly wanted to leave, but he got emotional a few times over being on the season. Seeing him go early was shocking, and they tried to make the CT Pro Tip stuff happen, but it's clearly given to him because he had nothing else going on in the season, and he tried to edit his messy antics with the likes of Theo. This was probably the most kooky Emily has ever been on the show, which is more refreshing compared to how kind of narrow straight she was in her prior seasons. It's clear that she only did this season because it's a special season, and I don't expect to see her again, especially on the flagship. Though, based on the casting rumors of 41, that might not be true, but we'll have to wait and see. Laurel 1 lost half of their team, and Laurel is still complaining about Carmaria to Bananas, who is trying to handle the entire house hating Laurel to the best of his ability. Jenny rants at her team for being a target yet again, especially since Michelle hasn't been nominated once, where Era 4 does agree that Jenny is expendable because she does not have the connections that they do. At the same time, she wasn't cast for 4 years, so how is that her fault? Though Casey is tired of Jenny talking about her animals. Tori and Josh are talking about the alliances between the two of them, but Josh wants to make it up to Banana for turning on him during USA 2. Brad knows that they are going in if they lose, and Naya complains to Avery and Tori about Jonay being selfish, and Corey is not thrilled with being paired up with Jonay due to it, where he's complaining about it to Nehemiah. Jonay does speak to Nehemiah since she didn't see her friend voting her in, though she knows that he is a huge reason why she won All Stars 2, and it also stinks due to her biological mother giving her up, so I guess it shows the betrayal or abandonment issues within her. It literally goes as deep as birth. Jenny complains about her team to Bananas, who says that she is working for a team that will sandbag her, and Banana says that Devin is using Michelle as a pawn, which needs to be broken up. The daily is Cloudcatcher, where they have to race across a field through the obstacle to get their color-coded balloons, and connect the balloon to the stations without them popping or bursting, and then solving an equation. Derek injures his leg during the daily. Jordan is yelling like a lunatic at his team, and this was pretty boring to watch, to be honest. Era 4 wins the daily since they got the most balloons, and Era 1 is automatically going into elimination. Everyone knows that Josh is wishy-washy, and Era 4 has a meeting where he tells them that he wants their input, where Era 4 wants Johnny and Olivia in the elimination since they are aligned with Era 3 and their big threats that need to go. Wait, why did I write Johnny and Olivia? I'm pretty sure it's Johnny and Laura. I don't know why I wrote Olivia there. Just ignore that. Bananas brings up what Josh did on USA 2, but he doesn't want to cross Corey since they have never crossed one another. I actually do remember him crossing and plotting Corey's demise on Spies, Lies, and Allies, but it's clear what's going to happen here. Jenny is encouraging Josh to make a selfish choice instead of the team choice, and they tell their era that Johnny and Corey are going in, where of course Era 4 is not thrilled with this decision at all. Michelle mentions that at least Era 3 tries to talk to them, and Josh wants to make it up to Johnny, where they all kind of clock Josh's issue. The two of them tell Jonay and Corey that they are going in, and they all talk about how the two of them do not see the bigger picture. Corey and Josh have yet another conversation, and he knows where Josh stands now. While they're going to the bus and leaving the club, Bananas warns Michelle about Devin, and she tells her boyfriend about it on the bus. And Devin is pissed off about how Bananas is trying to interfere in their relationship, and he wants to confront Bananas, where Michelle does not want him to do this at all. Devin confronts Bananas the next day about him allegedly using Michelle for gang, and Bananas calls him out for taking him out, and Bananas is claiming that he doesn't want Devin to get in the way of his and Michelle's friendship, though Olivia does mention that Bananas did state that Devin was using her for game since she was there for the conversation. Michelle and Bananas then argue about what was supposedly said, and he doesn't want her to fall into the same traps that she did in her past showmances. Brad and Corey and Janae and Rachel compete on to the point where they have to throw their balls on the other wall, or the pointy things on the wall, where it will attach to a spike. But the opponent will be playing defense as well, and the one with the most balls on their wall wins. The elimination is fine enough, where Corey does beat Brad and Rachel beats Janae. Rachel and Corey chooses Tina and Darrell. He volunteers, which is dumb, especially over Derek, where Derek's the bigger liability. Nehemiah and Aviv, Nia and Jordan volunteer, and Kellen and Michelle also volunteer because she sees her female pairs or partners or people who are also targets from others as not as strong, and she feels confident with going against them. I don't have much to say about either Brad or Janae here. I will say that Dad Brad doesn't care about fucking on the show, but he was kind of a mess and also in a not fun way, and he hasn't held his own competitively this season. A more forgettable showing from him overall. Janae also didn't get much to do this season, and apparently a lot of her messiness with Era 3 was edited out, where she only got screen time on her final episode. It's clear that Janae's All-Stars run is well behind her at this point, though she's been performing worse than even her main flagship shows in her recent seasons. Corey is over Era 4, and Rachel speaks to Nehemiah about her choosing him as a target, though he's kind of over it, where there was no communication between the eras, but he can at least rely on Nyan. Bananas is annoyed that he and Nehemiah are consistently chosen as targets, where they are the stronger men of their era, and Tori decides to throw a birthday party for Devon, where she encourages as men, though I'm pretty sure Cara's just wearing Polly's clothes, and Derek and Ryan are dressed as women where they are strippers. Devin and Michelle are kissing and they want their relationship to blossom, and he's never gone on a challenge, or he's never had a challenge relationship before. Darrell's back is finally healing from the Tony elimination, but Derek is still injured. But Naya speaks to Nehemiah about how she's always going to choose and protect him, despite Kylan being her showmans. The daily is Leap of Faith, where the four of them have to run off a building to grab a flag, and the rest have to pull up their partner, where they then have to solve a puzzle. It's a good enough daily, but it ends with Era 3 winning, as Tina accidentally grabs two flags, kind of disqualifying them. And Joel accomplishes his feat of height, for now, and Aviv does it as the shortest person, and Era 4 is automatically going into elimination. Olivia talks to Naya about how she is falling for Theo, and Doral refuses the campaign, and there's some weirdly shot angle of Nehemiah, Jordan, Corey, and Doral talking about their options, and Doral would rather go against Nehemiah than Corey. Michelle talks about her brother getting a life-changing injury right before she did the show on Spice Lies and Allies, and watching her on the show reunites the family. I do remember her stating this on podcasts in prior years. And Devin is sure that Michelle is not going to say his name, especially if she wins, despite it being Devin's turn to volunteer next for his era, so Corey knows that he's going to get screwed yet again. Rachel campaigns to Naya, and she talks about her friendship with Tina, Darrell, and especially Nehemiah, but Rachel is pushing for Naya to nominate Era 2, though Naya mentions that the easiest thing would be to finish off Era 1 from her perspective. Tina talks about her mother leaving the Vietnam War, and she's talking a lot about her Vietnamese heritage overall, and filming the season in Vietnam brought her closer to her culture. And this being mentioned now was just a sign that Tina was going home here, where Kylan also talks about being nonverbal. Naya and Jordan tell Tina and Doral that they are going in, and Tina is annoyed that Naya hugged her right before saying it, and Rachel is confused since Era 2 gives Era 3 the most competition in the dailies. Tina blows up as she mentions that it was a weak ass move and she's tired of being everyone's punching bag and they are not playing bold games. Naya mentions that she had to protect her brother Nehemiah, and Jordan mentions that it makes more sense for his game, and it is a game of cards, where she mentions that it's an excuse to play or betray a friend, and Jordan doesn't have the energy to yell at Tina, like how he yells at everyone else, which I found to be very funny to watch. Bananas tells Nehemiah that the other guys do not plan on self-nominating, i.e., Ryan and Derek, and Ryan walks in thinking that Bananas is full of shit, where he calls him out for his strategy, so the two of them are arguing about this, and Bananas is hoping that this argument will pressure not Ryan to self-nominate himself, and Ryan is tired of being expendable in all of his 20s when he was on the show, so essentially the Era 2 seasons, where he kind of blames Bananas and his alliance for playing a part in that. We get to the elimination where Darrell and Khaled and Tina and Michelle play in Phobia, where they have to push and pull the poles to get through a wall, where they have to remember the codes and the mathematical signs, where if they get through the walls, they have to solve the equation to open the lock. Not my favorite type of elimination, and it's not the most fun to watch. Anyways, Michelle beats Tina, and Darrell would have won had he not double checked the answer on the sand and smoothed out the sand before writing his equation, where Khaled ends up beating him yet again. Rachel and Derek have to go in since there's no one else, where Michelle and Kylan nominate Derek and Carmaria. Deborah refuses to step up, so Corey and Avery are nominated. She volunteers, and Jenny and Theo, he volunteers, are nominated. And this is the third time we're getting Jenny. Joel had some funny moments throughout the season with his broken back and commentary, but it's not one of his better or more memorable seasons, despite winning an elimination. There was that fight with Laurel, so I do think Darrell should just move on to All Stars. So I think at the CT, he will be the most likely man of the era to be on the flagship again. Tina was a hoot to watch this season. She definitely got in better shape from her prior All Star seasons, and we did see that in her performances throughout the season, especially with her All Stars performances being disappointing. She definitely brought the drama and humor or to the season, though it just got worse on social media and the reunion overall. But the strategy part of the game just isn't there for her. Eric and Rachel are trying to make the best out of being the only two people from Era 1, and they'll go in again if they make it through this round, since there's literally no one else to nominate, and Derek's leg is still hurting from 2 episodes ago. Jenny rants about being thrown in again, and Nehemiah sees Era 2 as Destiny's Child before the breakup, and he is connected to Era 3, and Corey is connected to Era 2. Ryan moves out of the Era 2 room to get away from Bananas and Laurel, and we get Laurel's side of the Ryan fallout where he blamed her for Nicole texting him non-stop. Derek and Theo decide that their team should team up in the next daily so they can take out Era 2 and 3. The daily is Battle for Honor, where they have to knock the other eras out with their Roman inspired gear, where there will be a man and a woman's round. So we see Josh getting injured due to the equipment breaking off, and Jordan also cut his face from it too. Apparently, he really laid into production about this, and he had to get surgery on his face due to it. Corey asks Theo to let him win, and Theo outright rejects it, and Corey calls out Theo. Derek calls out Corey's poor sportsmanship, and so the two of them are going at it, and Derek throws his arm at Corey while he is walking away, which is brave of him, since Nelson already punched him before, and we've seen Corey get violent as well. But all of this is just really ridiculous. Outside of the weird shenanigans of production incompetence, I did enjoy the challenge. Era 4 ends up winning the daily, and Era 1 is automatically going into elimination again, but with the way that it was set up, it was almost guaranteed for them to go into elimination again. Derek isn't going to save Avery to repay her, but he's doing this because he's not in power, and Carmery is also in danger. Derek's entire game throughout his career is about hiding and avoiding eliminations, so this isn't shocking. Avery and Corey talk about what they need to do and talk about how Era 1 and 4 had a deal due to the assumption that Avery and Derek would save one another, but they do want to kind of work with Era 4, and it's mainly Devin pushing this as he's speaking to the two of them in this conversation. So they make a pitch to Era 4, but it falls on deaf ears, and this ends up with Corey and Derek agreeing again, where Derek mentions that Rachel wants to face Avery, where Corey sees it as Derek's slick way of saying that he wants to see him in the elimination without saying it, but he's ready to give Derek the work if he needs to. Corey is annoyed that Rachel couldn't even say herself that she wanted to see Avery in the elimination, but she had Derek do it. Theo and Jenny tell the others about their thoughts, and despite Michelle wanting to work with Era 3, the two people are sure about their plan, since Theo is close to Cara Maria and Jenny has ties to Era 2. Cannon and Michelle want to work with Era 3, and Josh and Casey should have the vote go their way, but Theo and Jenny mentioned that they did this as a smokescreen, so the two of them would take the least heat for this choice, which is smart of them. Jenny and Theo tell Era 3 that it's a 5-2 vote to send in Era 3 so the others could get the blame instead of just the two of them. Corey is over it since Casey and Josh should have flipped the vote in his favor since it's the second time this season that Josh threw him under the bus. Michelle tells Devin that Jenny and Theo masked the decision, so he is losing trust with Casey and Josh as well, essentially the Vacation Alliance. Corey and Josh are arguing about how Corey wants Josh to go somewhere with that fake shit. Josh mentions that Corey was attacking Theo the entire time, so there's nothing he could do. Corey mentions that they are not his friends, and Josh is tired of not being allowed to speak, which is never something that Josh really has to deal with since he's always the one cutting people off and yelling over them. The two of them continue to yell at one another, and he doesn't see why he, out of all people, is being blamed out of everyone else who voted. Josh is breaking everyone else into it, and Cannon is right that Josh should have just swayed the vote if he really wanted to, and Toy is just shocked about all this taking place. Casey and Josh realize that they were set up by Theo and Jenny. So Corey and Derek and Avery and Rachel play in Fate of the Gladiators, where the offense is blindfolded while... Sorry, the defense is blindfolded. No, sorry, I'm wrong. The offense, I was right the first time. The offense is blindfolded while they have gloves, while the defense has squeaky shoes and targets on the body, where the offense has to burst all of their targets. I think this elimination could have been good if they tweaked a few things. Avery was talking about not wanting her face touched on the daily, so obviously she got a lot of punches in the elimination where her face was touched and Rachel dog walks her. She barely even ducked during the entire time, which was honestly kind of just annoying to watch. Corey and Derek was a lot more competitive, but Corey ends up barely beating Derek, and they make up right after the elimination, which is nice. Rachel has to get nominated because there's literally no one else. Casey and Callan volunteer for Era 4, Devin and Tori volunteer for Era 3, and Laura is chosen. She was going to volunteer anyways, but Bananas tells her not to, and Ryan ends up volunteering. I know a lot of people were championing for Avery to come back, especially with her DQ on Rivals 3 via Leroy, and not getting another chance after that. But since coming back, she has been kind of disappointing. She did have a good episode with the Tony situation, but she didn't get much after that, though I do think that the part of it was due to the format making her alliances irrelevant, and her final episode just showed that the fight really isn't there. She might get another season, especially if Adam continues being cast, but she got more than a fair chance now, so we can't really excuse anything like we could on Rivals 2. Derek was definitely the underdog this season that everyone claimed that he has been his entire career, which he was only an underdog really for like 3 seasons out of like 12 or 13 that he's done. But he is more interesting and less rehearsed than he has been in a very long time, where he was playing the game a lot more aggressively and got into a few fights here. He was boring in like most of his era 2 seasons and 30-30, but he was a lot more rehearsed and contrived on All Star. So this was a good balance this season. It does suck that he tore up his leg, though he honestly should have been DQ'd earlier based on how early he got injured before he was eliminated. Definitely a notable season for him, despite the earlier boot. Corey, Devin, Michelle, and Josh talk about the Vacation Alliance, but they all know that either Era 3 or 4 needs to win, so they can save one another. But Josh is close with Rachel, as she helped him train for years, and he wants to protect her as well. Bananas is speaking with Rachel and a few others about how they need to get out Era 3 and 4 and to nominate them against one another, essentially. The daily is bottoms out, where we hear awful Derek and especially Ryan jokes about the hee hee ha ha, where they have to answer an equation which will lead them to their position with the back portion of a truck, which is above water, and it is a battle of endurance there once the bottom of it opens. I actually do enjoy the daily, and Rachel ends up winning it, though it's easier to do as one person since you have more platforms to balance on compared to doing it with many people in it, and Era 3 is automatically going into elimination. Rachel has made up her mind about sending in Era 4, i.e., Casey and Kellen, to go against Devin and Tori, and she's happy about her win. Casey is hoping that Josh can campaign for herself and Kellen to not go in, and Jordan thinks that Rachel should work with Era 3 and 4, since Ryan has no power and Laura won't protect Rachel, and he's also saying this because Laura is his ex. Casey speaks to Rachel about how they have an unspoken thing, and Rachel thinks it is convenient that Casey is speaking to her now, and Ryan thinks that she will protect him due to being friends for 20 years. Kynan gives Rachel his record, and he's working with Kynan. Rachel tells Josh that there's nothing he can do or say to change her mind, and Josh wants to protect Casey, but his hands are tied. Essentially, Rachel wants a Devin or a KC alliance so she could be free to take Josh in as an ally as well as Tori, though she tells Era 4 that they're going into elimination. Devin rants to Era 4 about how it is war now and how they are going to put some heat onto Josh now, since they all kind of blame him. Both Eras confront Josh about it, and Michelle is cutting him off, and Devin mentioned that Josh is too comfortable in his friendships, and he is trying to protect Johnny too much. Josh does not see why he should choose a side, which I honestly agree with him about, and sees. Sorry. Casey, my bad, Casey, not Colin, sees Josh as a liability, and this comment would really hurt Josh once he saw the episode back. We have Tori and Casey and Devin and Cannon competing in Cable Connection Showdown, where they have to light up all signs of the 40 seasons, but they have to connect each plug to the right outlet, and the board will only light up for a few seconds, so they need to memorize the connections. This elimination was decent on paper, but it was not the most exciting in actuality, and despite Devin winning an elimination like this on Vendettas, he performs really poorly here, where Karen easily washes him. Tori and Casey is a lot closer, where it's literally by a millisecond, but Casey is eliminated and Tori beats her. TJ announces that the cast or the format is going individual now, but Tori has to choose three men, which are Bananas, Ryan, and Derek as targets, and Kelly nominates Rachel, Aviv, and Jenny as targets. Evan was not as annoying as he was in his last two seasons, and while I am happy that he went home earlier than he has in a while, I do think he would have brought more drama than Khaled in the second half of the season. He had a rise and a very huge fall here, but he needed to be humbled. He moved right onto All Stars rivals, so he clearly wanted some redemption after this poor showing, especially at that elimination. Casey didn't have much screen time on the season, and without her being strong competitively, they really had no need to show her, but there's still a bit of that arrogance there, but it did set her up for a fall. Casey claimed after the episode aired that she's retiring from reality TV overall, and while it is well overdue, I will believe it when she has been off for a few years after this, though it might have been due to family issues that she's was having at the time with her father's recent death. Nana is shocked that Tori chose him as a target, and Josh and Tori are going to work together as individuals, despite what happened in the last episode. Maria speaks to Rachel about her area being wiped out and is shocked that Rachel now likes Johnny and feels like she is not on the defense. Carmaria is not on the defense, like she has been on the last few seasons that she has done, and she is a photographer now, which helps her. Jordan is planning on laying low, and we learn about Banana's angels, which includes Bananas, Laurel, Jenny, Rachel, and Aviv. Michelle is closing up to the other Era 3 and 4 men, and Derek and Ryan wants to continue doing well today, but both of them are targets, and the elimination record isn't the best, so yeah. It's a men's elimination day, and the daily is Fire Away, where a ball is launched that they have to gather and stack them into like a cylinder or whatever, and then they have to complete a puzzle. I didn't care for the daily much at all, but Jordan wins out of the guys, and Tori wins out of the women. Ryan gets last because he didn't realize that the puzzle had a 40 sign on it, and I think he was one of the first to arrive, so that's a huge flop there. So he's going into elimination, and Michelle is last out of the women, so she will get a disadvantage at the next daily, since it is a girls' elimination round there. Michelle has a meltdown and is dealing with overheating, where the cast and crew are trying to cool her down. We learn about the Ladies of Leisure Alliance, which includes Olivia, Michelle, and Naya. How convenient that they're talking about it now, but apparently Derek and Ryan were also kind of in it, but it never made it to the edit. Johnny, Derek, and even Ryan have to make their case, and Ryan doesn't want to go against Derek, and Bananas mentions that Devin drew the line in the sand, but he doesn't want Tori to turn against him due to Devin, and Tori mentions his issues with Devin. Devin ruined his friendship with her. Everyone kind of knows that Bananas is going in, and Jordan is encouraging Tori to make the huge move. Tori and Derek have a conversation where it's clear that he isn't going to elimination at this point. Bananas is sent into elimination against Ryan, where they play in Killer Quad, where they're on their own quad transportation and are driving in a circle to grab the flag on the other's quad, and the best out of three wins it. Both Bananas and Ryan talk about their fathers being in the war. I think both were in the Vietnam War, so that's an interesting contrast. The elimination was very boring to watch, and of course Bananas beats Ryan's. He ends up picking Olivia, Nia, and Michelle as targets since he can't pick the immune Tory, which he's thrilled about, while making the most obnoxious speech ever. Ryan was just there this season. He and Laurel talked a lot about one another in the confessionals, and he talked about her to people, but it never led to anywhere. He won the elimination against Brandon, and then had that random fight with Bananas, but he really doesn't give anything whatsoever. More or less the same with him, though I don't remember him ever getting booted in the middle of a season. I wouldn't care if he never comes back, but I'm sure we'll see him once every few years. So there are two sides of the house where everyone not in the Angels are working with one another, and Khaled is shocked that it's a target over Carmaria, since it is known how much Bananas does not like Carmaria, and he doesn't give a crap about what the boyfriends have to say. As Khaled and Theo are trying to speak to him about it. Michelle and Bananas get into another fight where he tells her, i.e. Naya, that Michelle started it. Michelle mentions that he never cared since he went out of his way to hurt her, and he doesn't get the illusion of him trying to ruin Devin's life, which started the entire thing, and she does not like him kicking her while she's down. Naya talks about being a corporate attendant or flight attendant, and she makes a lot of friends, which happened with Olivia and Michelle, where Olivia is pissed off that Bananas called her a snake since she got tore apart last season for that, especially online. The daily is building bridges where they have to climb a truck, go through some levels to grab some coins, go down a pole, and then jump on a kicking bag to hold, and it's the quickest man and woman who wins the daily. I find this to be pretty boring to watch, to be honest, but Nye and Theo get last place, which really isn't shocking based on their track record on the dailies this season, causing Kurt to go directly into elimination, and Khalid and Jenny win the daily. Michelle tells Colin that she is fine with whatever decision he makes and to ease pressure off of him. Olivia confronts Bananas about his comments to her at the elimination and about all of the stuff that he says about her, where she doesn't talk about him. He wants a name and he wants facts, and she has the names and facts, but she refuses to give it to him, where he tells her that she's directing it at the wrong person. Bananas then mentions that everyone knows who he is working with and calls out Tori and Jordan for playing both sides, and tells Naya that she's low on Jordan's list. Jordan refuses to engage in it, which shows maturity on his part, to be honest, but Tori does engage in it, where she does stand up and says that she's doing it, and he's calling out what it is, since no guy will make her a target, and she can double deal with all of them. They're not friends anymore, according to Tori, because of the way that he treats her friends, and he doesn't know her. I do think Bananas partially did this because he knew the season was getting boring and needed some drama. Rachel is making deals with Corey, so he and Nehemiah cannot say her name, and she has Corey speak to Nehemiah about this, though honestly she should have spoken to Nehemiah herself. Naya speaks to Bananas, and he mentions that Rachel, Aviv, Laura, and Tori are Jordan's top four women, and she does ask Jordan about this, but he kind of refuses to answer. So she knows that it's kind of just confirmation to her, but she can't even blame him too much because she performed poorly in the dailies this season. Bananas tells the others this, and Josh says that it is true since Jordan has told him and the others about how Naya is the anchor on the Era 3 team out of all the women, and they mentioned that Kamura might be more of a priority to him than Naya. Jenny makes a deliberation about her, and Michelle essentially cuts her off, so she and Olivia have been nothing but respectful to Jenny throughout this year, and no one cares about Jenny being left out of Era 3. Sorry, Era 4 now. Michelle is sent to elimination with Naya, where they compete in fortification, where they have to do a bunch of equations to unlock the chains around the boxes, and then they have to move the boxes. This elimination is one of the most boring to watch, but Michelle beats Naya here. Maya ends up telling Karen that she loves him, which is crazy since they went absolutely nowhere right after this. Michelle names Bananas, Jordan, and Nehemiah as targets. Maya had a grand return to the franchise, which has definitely been in the works since All Stars 3, and she did redeem herself as a calmer, more sane personality. I did find her to be very disappointing as a competitor, especially with the dailies, where she performed consistently poorly. I'm glad her showmatch with Karen didn't get much screen time, and she's a lot calmer here. It was nice to see her back, though I did find her to be underwhelming competitively, but I'm not clamoring to see her back, but I'm not going to freak out if she does come back either. Michelle, Olivia, and Kellen talk about how she pissed people off with her nominee choices, and they need to pick up anyone who isn't a Bananas Angel at this point. So the Angels talk about how Bananas was the one who got Jordan to be a target, and Rachel is working with all the targets this round. Aviv has an injury on her foot from the last daily, and Laurel and Bananas talk about how Tori hasn't spoken to them, and we learn about Laurel not having debt anymore due to her winnings from All Stars 4 and her wanting to work with animals. And this being aired now, out of all the episodes, wasn't a good indication of Laurel's longevity at this point. And Tori and Jordan also talk about the game, where he knows that he needs to win, as he wants another win here since he'll have 5 wins with CT. Rachel talks to Kylan about how the season is like the duel 2, where the strong guys kept the strong women around, and Cara Maria, Olivia, Josh talk about the game and how Thea has not performed the best. This season being compared to the Duel 2 is very fitting in more ways than one that I'll probably take into consideration when I'm ranking the seasons. The daily is the mini final titled Doomed, where they have to race to get a key and then unlock a paddle board, ride it for a mile, play a memory game, and then get to the finish line. It is also a purge, so the last man and the last woman will be booted from the game. The second last man will go right into elimination, and the second last woman will have a disadvantage over the next daily. Theo already has a disadvantage from performing glass in the last daily, so he has a 2-minute penalty. Callan and Tori win the daily. Theo and Michelle get second last, and Nehemiah and Laurel get last place, so they are purged. Essentially, Laurel already got last place as the others beat her, but she then decided to quit because she knew that she was already out. Laurel was extremely unlikable in the season, with her picking random fights with people, going for low blows, and there's really nothing redeemable about her in the season whatsoever. Though she also claimed that she wasn't into it this season, but she was doing stuff like throwing challenges to make sure Emily got out. So I don't know how much I could believe her. And a postseason press really doesn't make her look good at all. She allegedly brought some very personal stuff with Cara Maria and also Darrell at the reunion that the show thinks is too toxic, which is why it was edited out. At this point, I would be fine if she doesn't come back, but if she does come back, it has to be a while from now, and she definitely needs a very, very, very long break at this point. I know Nehemiah really wanted to be back on the flagship and put on a performance on the All Star seasons just for this opportunity, but he was arguably the most invisible person on the season. He was aligned with Corey, which never went anywhere, and he did beat CT in the elimination, but there really was just nothing there. I honestly think he should just stick with All Stars at this point, but you could argue that this might be karma for him being so contrived and performative on the All Stars seasons, which he recently admitted to. Everyone knows that Bananas is going into elimination, and there's a segment about Derek's wig, and he's hoping that his social game will keep him out of elimination. Bananas clips his toenails and blows it at the deliberation. This is clearly a TV moment, though he knows that it's also a waste of time. Bananas is over people burning him so many times throughout this game, where Tori was in the trenches with him and standing with the other side, so they get riled up before he walks off. There's a lot of talk about Theo being soft this season, which may have been due to Olivia. The elimination between Bananas and Theo is coming out, where they have to go through a tube, where they then have to put tubes in their opponent's tube. Whomever wins the round of high/low game, they get to put more in their opponent's tube. This was a decent enough elimination with going through the tubes, though the high/low game was boring. But Theo really had no chance here, since he is so much taller and his shoulders are so much wider than Bananas. Michelle is then snapping at Josh because he's rooting for the both of them. I don't know why she feels so entitled, and he's tired of her attitude, rightfully so, so they're snipping at one another, which will carry into the next episode. Bananas chooses Olivia, Michelle, and Carmaria as targets. Thea has been kind of disappointing since he came back, since he has been severely under-edited on both seasons. Well, a part of me does think that the competitive edge isn't there anymore, especially with his poor performance in the dailies this season. They do tend to edit out whatever drama he went through, where he had some issues with both CT and Nehemiah. His relationship with Olivia was also kind of under-edited, and while I'm sure he's coming back, it isn't something that brings any excitement anymore. I guess him being under-edited causes me to not be annoyed with his trash opinions, though. Michelle and Josh continue their fight from the elimination when they are back in the house, and Bananas calls her out for being mad that Josh was cheering him on. Michelle mentions that him cheering Bananas meant cheering against her, and she is over the situation and wants Josh to leave her alone, though Michelle really started all this, and he mentions that he's tired of being put in the middle, though he always puts himself in the middle of these situations. She says that she doesn't care about them being friends, and Michelle tells Josh to not let them create a problem, with Banana stirring the pot as well, calling her out for her behavior, and she should just own up to it. Olivia is grieving for her relationship with Theo, since the chances of making it after the house, as they live in different continents, aren't high. We then have Michelle, Carmaria, Tori, and Olivia talking about Johnny's foot fetish and how the angels just play feet together. 40-yard dash is is the daily where they have to get 6 puzzle pieces in the cravings in the water, and then they have to solve a puzzle piece where they have to create a triangle out of it. I actually enjoy this daily, which Jordan and Carmaria end up winning. Michelle and Chloe get last, and because Carmaria won and Michelle is already in elimination, Olivia automatically has to go in, despite her getting second in the daily. So there's no chamber here. Of course, the women are sad about it, and on the bus ride back, Michelle makes a comment about Bananas and Aviv's feet touching. He takes offense to this since he gets the insinuation about Bananas and Aviv being inappropriate, and it's just not a good look. Michelle does mention that she is poking, but doesn't care. He calls her nasty, she says that she isn't, and he is tired of them taking low blows because they have no path in this game, and taking low blows at Aviv isn't fair. He calls her out for being a catty woman, not being up to par physically, and making every dumb move possible this season, and the likes of Carmen is also tired of it, and she also jumps in to defend Michelle. Kylan and Michelle are one another's number ones, despite their different gameplays last season, and she talks to Corey about saving him, though she gave her loyalty to Derek. Corey and Carmeria are now working together, but this doesn't really amount to much in my opinion, and she's mainly doing this since Theo went home and they have no one else. Michelle and Aviv make up after that mess, and Corey is told by Michelle that he isn't being saved by her. The elimination is stranded, where they have to build their ladders with different size poles, get their bag at the top of the ladder, and then make a puzzle. This was an okay elimination, though I am tired of the consistent puzzles in all these eliminations, where Michelle does beat Olivia, despite Olivia having the lead in the physical part. Michelle picks Bananas, Corey, and Josh as their targets. It is clear that Olivia is a side character instead of the main character that some people expected of her when Ride or Dies happened, and I think she's fine with that overall. Olivia is very image conscious, and the backlash of last season was a lot for her to deal with, and she really wanted to be as calm as possible. She could have some fun commentary at times, and is a decent enough competitor, though most of her content was about Theo when it was shown. It seems like she's going to be the main late 30s woman who will be consistent on the show, just from the looks of the casting trends that's happening for 41 now and the consistency. Michelle does not know how she's going to play without Olivia, and Bananas is hoping that one of his angels wins the daily, since he won't be a target otherwise. Derek is talking about being underestimated and wants to get to the final. Josh does not want to beg Michelle for safety, so he essentially told her to nominate him, though she's probably going to nominate him anyway, since they just got into that fight in the last episode and they're not working together clearly. Corey is hoping that Tori can be his number 2 woman, and we see them studying the seasons together. And Rachel also speaks to Tori about respecting one another, as they are being protected by all the guys. The daily is nothing Rucker. I don't even know if I'm saying that correctly, but I don't care at this point. Where they'll be on the arm of a truck and then have to use precision and power to hit the target while the truck is going 50 miles per hour. Actually, do you think this daily is pretty good, where Jordan and Derek have to do a tiebreaker round? Rachel and Derek end up winning the daily, where Josh and Aviv get last place, meaning Josh automatically going into elimination. With Rachel winning the daily, it is clear that Corey is going in and Bananas is not going into elimination, where Josh is crying about his parents who migrated from Cuba. So with this being shown here, it's clear that he's going home, and I'm always confused when he says that he needs the money when he won big brother, and he needs that money or the prize money to give to his parents. Anyways, there's not much to cover here, and we have Corey and Derek talking where the latter would want to throw in bananas, but his hands are tied here since Rachel just won't allow that. Carmaria and Tori have become friends again since their like for dressing as men have bonded one another. Corey is fine with being in an elimination against Josh as he wants his revenge for earlier on in the season and Josh targeting him twice. So Bananas and Rachel talk about their bad history with Rachel, or his bad history with Rachel being on the darkest season, The Island, and they're glad to make up here, since this is the first season that they've done since, which is a lie, since he did Battle of the Exes one together, but I guess someone like Bananas is like way to remember all the seasons he's done, since he's done like all of them, essentially. Rachel and Derek talk about the LGBTQ stuff and how they both won this, and they feel like they have to represent the community on the show, and there's a full-fledged attack on their community now, where Rachel feels more scared now than 20 years ago where she wore an LGBT shirt on her earlier seasons. Nelson calls Corey on his weekly calls, and they talk about his accident, while also ignoring that it was due to a drink and drive crash, where he recently lost his right lower leg, and Nelson's getting an amputee leg, or a prosthetic leg, my bad. We get to the elimination coming from behind, where one person is running on one side of the wall as an offense to ring the bell, where the defense has to stop them as they're running on the other side of the wall and has to intercept. And then they switch positions. Corey absolutely washes Josh in this elimination. Corey then targets Jenny, Michelle, and Aviv as targets. Josh was not as annoying this season like he was in the past, but it's still the same old story with him. He is friends with everyone, he gets into some drama with people, and then he's overwhelmed by all the friendships that he has with people, and then he underperforms soon before the final, where when he's inevitably thrown into an elimination. It'll be interesting to see what happens if the Vacation Alliance truly crumbles after the season, or if it's just another contrived situation. I think more sporadic appearances from Josh would be better in my opinion, from this point onwards. Cara Maria and Corey know that they're on the outs, and the Bananas Angels are annoyed at hearing Cara Maria's voice, who just conveniently realizes alliances now, so she has to get in one. Or at least that's their viewpoint on things. Rachel wants to make deals with Jordan and Cannon because they are making the most, or they're winning the most dailies, and Erethy is talking about their position, and they are all very close. Aviv and Michelle know that they are vulnerable due to being targets and smaller people in general. The daily is tight quarters, where they have to go through the tunnels in the forest, grab a puzzle bag, and then solve their puzzle once they are out of the tunnel, where the fastest person wins. I don't have much of an issue with this daily, but it is a bit too long to watch, though we had a great moment of Bananas getting flustered with the puzzle, which is TJ's face, and he is ranting about wanting to punch the face, and TJ is just dying of laughter behind him. Aviv accidentally ran the wrong way, so she's automatically DQ'd and going into elimination, and she already had the disadvantage from the last daily. Tori and Kellen win the daily, and it is clear that Jenny is going to be sent into elimination with Aviv. Michelle encourages Kellen to make the move needed to be made, and they are the only ones who have never made it to a final out of the cast, so they want to help one another get there. The non-angels have a birthday celebration for Michelle, and Tori and Carmaria are glad that they are friends now. Tori and Carmaria dress up as men to kind of give Michelle some sort of dance, and Tori is dressed as Devin, which Michelle just sees as hilarious. It doesn't seem like Bananas Angels joined the celebration. Rick sucks if they didn't, but I know how the edits can be deceiving with stuff like this. Rachel and Bananas gives Aviv and Jenny props for making it this far, especially Aviv, who hasn't played in like 18 years. Corey talks to Kyland about how they want another black person to be in the final, since the last time there was a black winner is Nehemiah. Great message overall, but you know what? I'm gonna leave it alone this time. Having someone of black descent, which is different than a black person, winning would be cool since it has been a while since a man of black descent, meaning mixed or black, not just black, is yeah. We're just gonna move on. I could go on. We're just gonna move on. Anyways, Aviv speaks to her husband and things are getting emotional for her. Obviously, Jenny is sent in against Aviv, and they play in Iron Triangle, where they're in a triangular cage and have to throw the ball out of the cage without leaving the circle. And Jenny absolutely washes Aviv here. Jenny chooses Jordan, Corey, and Derek to be targets. Aviv was obviously a shocking choice to come back, since she only did one season 18 years ago, and she only did one season because she was on the phone too much on Fresh Meat 1, where they saw her as boring, and she benefited from Linda dropping out of the season. It was nice to see her come back while somewhat in a midlife crisis and having a natural reaction to things, and making it to the endgame of the season, despite her not really knowing anyone. I didn't find it to be particularly interesting, but I'm more than fine with her being on an all-star season in the future at this point, but just not the main flagship show. Johnny is calling out Corey for being a used car salesman, and he's just joking about being nominated 4 times now. Cara Maria and Derek talk about his chance of getting to the final, and there's a lot of talk about Derek being misunderstood. The daily is Fire Plant, where they have to solve a puzzle to hotwire the car that will go off a 300-foot cliff, and then they have to swim a 500 mile or foot, I don't really remember. Swim. I remember this challenge being hyped up a lot, but it was relatively disappointing. People note Cannon's weak swimming, which is a sign of what's to come, where Tori and Jordan win the daily, and Cara Maria and Derek get last place, meaning that he is automatically going into elimination. Because Jordan was the other target and he won the daily, there's no other choice than for Corey to go in. There's a lot of talk about stuff I really don't want to address here, but Derek and Corey talk about their elimination, and Derek mentions that tomorrow is his sister's birthday, as she took her own life right before he went onto All Stars 2, and they watched the show together. Kylan is told that finals are hell, and people want to go to the final before actually doing it. Or at least that's what Bananas is saying, and Bananas is intentionally doing this to rile him up, but Kylan is still really excited for the final. So Derek talks about leaving for All Stars 2 on a Thursday, where he saw his sister on a Monday and not seeing her on Tuesday before getting the call about her that evening, and this is just really, really, really sad. Corey calls his family as he is missing his children because he's an active father, unlike his father, and Cheyenne clowns him for making it that far, and he doesn't win. Sorry, she makes fun of him if he comes back home without winning and calls him a loser. And it's nice seeing this banter between them. Jenny decides to ask Derek to not nominate her despite her just nominating him, and he makes fun of her politics, where she mentioned saving him forever ago as her trying to argue why she should be safe, though she's the reason why he's a target now. The elimination is closing time where they have to pull a wheel which will open up the gate, raise it to get as many cinder blocks as possible, not placing it on the sand, and then they have to make a wall that has a logo on it. The elimination is fine, but it does show the difference in strategy between the two of them, where Derek does end up beating Corey in the elimination. Derek makes Jenny, Rachel, and Carmaria targets, where Carmaria told Derek earlier to choose her to give Michelle a break, which is dumb, based on what will happen, and TJ announces a location change. Corey is someone who definitely struggles in the political and social element of the show. Not that he's actively bad in it, but he kind of puts it aside, as he's on the bottom for a lot of the season. But he had more fire in him than he did in the last several seasons, got into a decent amount of drama here and there. It sucks that he didn't make it to the final of the season, but I don't know if he's going to end up winning the show eventually. But I do think he's one of the best to never win at this point, and he's been more entertaining here than his last few seasons. Eric is thrilled with his win, and everyone is happy with the location change, which ends up being the Philippines. It ends up with them eating dinner, and they talk about their best moments, where Bananas mentions Stefan going home, and Michelle mentions that her best time was every time she made Johnny into a target, and she said this to intentionally rile him up. I don't care to mention everyone else's best moment, but Tori mentions that in the last few seasons, where one side was controlling everything, that wasn't the case this season, and Bananas calls her out for being the person doing that in the last few seasons. He is right about this, but he also has done this on several seasons as well, so it's kind of a hypocritical point overall, where it's mainly different people who had control and got to the end of the season, but people in general are just over the situation, especially with Bananas playing the victim to Michelle and Tori. It is announced that all 4 of the men are in the final, but last place will get a disadvantage in the final. The daily is Fortress Bricks, where they have to make it through some obstacle course, bring up every brick and plank, and then solve some sort of puzzle. I didn't really care for the daily, but Jenny, in a controversial manner for her, because it was debated whether she actually completed it properly, and Jordan win the daily, with Tori and Derek getting last in the daily, meaning Tori is going to elimination. Jordan and Jenny have to decide which one of Carmaria or Rachel they're going to save or put into elimination, and we learn that Jordan and Carmaria made up, though we never saw it throughout the season at all, which is just annoying. So the choice on who to save isn't easy. Cara Maria is happy about her evolution and making friends, and the fact that this is mentioned here was a sign that she's going home, since none of this was mentioned until now in the edit. Tori and Cara Maria is the elimination matchup as Jordan make a handshake with Rachel, and you can't go back on handshakes, and this matchup is really hyped up. It's also Cara Maria's birthday, where Derek, Michelle, and Tori give her a lot of balloons and a note and a cake. And ice cream, I think. They are living in the Sinister boat for the rest of the season, and the elimination is the final elimination. Great name. Where they have to swim within a circle and go under a barrel or under the barrel to get into the circle, but they have to stay above water for as long as possible. Where if they quit or go under, they will be out. Not really fond of this elimination. I'm watching people trying to not drown, and then there are fish biting them or whatever, and snakes show up in it as well. It takes 2.5 hours, but Tori does beat Cara Maria. This was Cara Maria's grand return to the flagship show after being off for the last several years, and she talked a lot of shit in the off season and online about how she was going to bring it and change shit up. She did the exact opposite. Though, with her being in the background this season, especially after the nasty fight with Laurel, is understandable, and she needed a calmer season here for future seasons. At the same time, she was kind of mediocre competitively, but she's overall just meh to me. Tori is really tired from being in the water for 3 hours. I'm not going to go through all the details of the finals since I think generally finals are boring, but I'll cover the small bits or the general journey. They are told about the karma votes, but won't know about how it factors into things until after the final. The final involves a lot of swimming as they start and end their checkpoint rounds on the boat. I do not like how they didn't really show who voted for who outside of the very general, choppy confessionals when it comes to the karma votes. The first checkpoint involves them swimming to an island, retrieving their puzzle pieces by running across a beach 5 times and then completing it. Their next checkpoint is to go onto a ship, go underwater to remember the symbols, then to recreate it at the top. Jordan talks a lot about using the money to become a full-time race car driver, and he mentioned this over the last few episodes. The third checkpoint involves them swimming to the island and climbing 1,000 steps to the other island. The end of the first night is them counting a bunch of coins accurately while being interrupted to sing a song where they have to do this overnight. We end the episode with Jenny absolutely losing it. I'm skipping over the rest of the overnight portion, and like I mentioned earlier, I don't care to talk about the results. But Jenny and Jordan have been dominating the final up until this point, with Derek and Rachel winning the overnight portion. They have to swim to a raft, then follow the instructions to grab an oar, make it to the fact to get some key and an underwater box. They have to swim to an island where there are two seats where there is a drink, and they have to play some speed math game, where if they get it right, they move on, and if they get it wrong, they stay until they get the answer wrong. The final checkpoint is them swimming to get a zipline machine where they get to a token and then go back to the boat. Just by the final performances, Jordan and JD are first, Derek and Michelle are second, Bananas and Rachel are third, and Tori and Planet are fourth. But due to the karma votes, Rachel ends up bumping from third and tying with Jenny to get first, so they both win and they have to split the money in half, and Michelle is bumped down to third from second, though she was 1 point away from tying first with the other two women. Tori came off as a lot less contrived and corny and a lot more likable this season. I don't know if it's due to her main alliance getting booted last or midway through the season and she kind of had to create her own path, or she felt like she didn't need to try as hard because she got her win. So she really didn't need to worry about all that. And she was kind of more in the background this season compared to her prior seasons where they're trying to push her as the main girl. So maybe that had something to do with it. But she competed very well in the regular season, though she performed poorly in the final, partially due to her elimination with Cara Maria happening the night beforehand, and maybe just her not being the best at finals. Tynan, being the new guy, definitely held his own with the guys as he won 2 eliminations and he won several eliminations at the individual point and helped his team win a decent amount as well. At the same time, I didn't think he was really interesting this season to watch. especially when he had his showmans with Naya that didn't get much coverage. But I do feel like Kanan's kind of an example of when you're not an underdog anymore, a lot of that fanfare really isn't there anymore, though his personality never really changed. But he didn't really bother me this season, though he mainly came off as a super fan, which I could see why he was like that. It'll be interesting to see how he's like in the future seasons. Bananas is relatively the same. In the fact that he can win some eliminations to save himself, he's most likely going to make it to the very end, and he's going to play producer. Him playing producer caused for some interesting and entertaining moments, but it also kind of got exhausting and annoying to deal with at times as well. So it's a relatively mixed bag overall. I did find it ironic that he cared all about feminism conveniently this season, though I think it's mainly due to the fact that Bananas Angels was a thing and the women had a huge part in the fate of the men in the season, but it's pretty much the same old, though we got a bit more personal content from him this season when it came to his father, which was interesting enough. Michelle entering the season had a lot of people predicting that she would be target number one because she's seen as one of their weaker women and because of her more villainous gameplay last season. But no, she actually grew socially, she held her own, winning 3 eliminations in the season, though I believe they were all mental, so that doesn't really help. And she did really well in the final, where she got second based off of so performance, but obviously the camera vote thing happened. We definitely did have her relationship with Devin, which caused some drama and kind of influenced the way that the second half of the season took place, and she got a lot more into the drama. It seems like she's becoming more of a major figure on the show, and she he definitely is kind of getting overexposed, so I'm glad that she's kind of taking a break for now. So I'm going to give Derek props for heavily improving his career and perception, not only just with All Stars 4, but in this season as well, as he made it to 2 back-to-back finals, and he played in one of the more competitive seasons here, almost winning the season and getting second, though that mainly has to do with him staying out of eliminations, but you shouldn't want to go into eliminations. At the same time, I still find it to be very, very boring to watch. He might have a decent confessional here and there, but I'll tell you that he really just doesn't offer anything to the show, so I'm not really inspired by him in any particular way. Rachel, I feel like she played a very good game to get to the final, as she was clearly the most fit woman on Era 1, so obviously she was seen as very valuable, and she had a lot of relationships with people from the other side, or from the other eras as well. So when she went individual, she was pretty much safe all the way around, since all the men wanted her in the final. At the same time, her performance in the final really, really wasn't good, and I didn't like how the camera point bumped her from third to first place. And she still always has this like smugness to her that doesn't make her the most likable. But it's still an interesting season for Rachel nonetheless. I know a lot of people online have mentioned that this is arguably Jordan's most boring season, and honestly, I don't really disagree with that. He clearly came very focused to get the win, and he talks about how he's there to compete and to not really have fun on the show. And I think by now he knows that he could just rely on his skills instead of really like getting involved in any of the drama or really getting that emotional over anything. And he's learned to lay under the radar, which is essentially what he did. And the format also benefited him because there's no reason why a woman would target him. He did get into a lot of drama with production as he was apparently calling them out throughout the entire season and just didn't like his experience with them. But of course, he got another very impressive win, and it's the first season that he never went into an elimination at all. Jenny definitely had another very impressive win where she held her own against the best of the best in all the other eras, though there are definitely some political and social flaws with her, hence her position on Era 4. But she went to eliminations, she won a few dailies, and she dominated the final. So she is 2 in 3 when it comes to winning, and she won 2 individual seasons, which is very impressive. At the same time, I don't think production likes her very much, and she didn't get the best content either, but she's also not really that interesting. So I wouldn't be shocked if she doesn't come back after this or she's only brought back sporadically. We're at the reunion, and Nehemiah goes on and off stage for throwing up. We really didn't need to see this, and Jordan, Jenny, and Rachel talk about their win, and the others talk about the final briefly. Tina is so salty about Jordan snaking her and how the show is more about the game. She's really just annoying the heck out of me here, where Jenny and Rachel talk about feminism and all that stuff. Devin is asked about his loyalty to Amanda, where he is not only, or he where he's not loyal to her anymore since she crossed the line with Tori and Michelle, two people he cares about, and this is where Michelle shows up in a duffel outfit. To be honest, this kind of ended up flopping since the cast didn't care for her antics, and she was eliminated right away. And I will say that it says a lot that Polly was backstage, but wasn't officially invited to the reunion. Amanda's annoyed at Devin's comment and thinks that his relationship with Michelle is not the most genuine, since Michelle has said stuff about this with every relationship she's been in, and she calls Devin an actor. And Michelle's not more secure than she has been now. Corey joined via video chat, and of course we talked about him turning on Amanda in the beginning, and he says that they barely spoke, and Naya told him not to throw her in against Avery. Amanda mentions Nelson, and Corey was told by his grandma to not trust a devil, and a bunch of the cast calls out Corey for barely having conversations with people and not checking up on him often. Not talking about the Tori and Josh stuff since they're well over it. Josh and Corey are arguing about what happened between them in the season, and it's just weird. Tina talks about the Naya and Jordan situation since she was annoyed that they let her on and they sensationalized it at her expense. Naya mentions that they spoke about this over and over again, and she made it clear that she was saving Nehemiah. Naya is annoyed that Tina dragged this out for months in real life and on social media. Olivia and Theo are still together, and so are Michelle and Devin. This translates to the mess with Bananas, Devin, and Michelle, where he said that he and Michelle talked about their relationships before the season, and Devin mentioned a few weeks into the season that he was targeting Bananas and wanted to use Michelle. Devin claims that this is bullshit, and Banana said that he would be out in 3 weeks to do some real life stuff, and Devin called him out on it since it's the oldest playbook trick, and mentioned that he would give Bananas double the weeks and make sure that he went home after that, and then Bananas got involved in this relationship. Bananas will apologize if Devin apologizes for doing Operation Dot Plot on Ryder Dice with Snowraya. Bananas' words, not mine, because they wanted to make sure that Baraya, yet again, Bananas' words, not mine, wasn't using him for gain. They are willing to move on, though Bananas and Devin are still taking shots at one another later on in the reunion and online after this was filmed, but it will take Michelle a lot longer. Era for sucking in the season is discussed, and it then led to Anissa and Rachel arguing for the latter, sending the former into the elimination, essentially letting CT control things. Rachel calls Anissa selfish for wanting Jodie, the second best woman, to be sent into elimination to run the team, and Anissa also calls Rachel selfish. It all ends up being fine, and they kind of joke about it after a while. There is talk about the split within the second half of the season, but Tori and Bananas are fine overall. Olivia calls out Bananas for trying to stir up trouble with her and Theo, but this ended up being cut off. Bananas cuts his toes again at the reunion, which is gross. Cara Maria and Laurel's issues are discussed, and they are not rehashing the details of it because of the legal implications. Laurel and Michelle were talking about the issues as she interpreted something of Michelle wrong, and then when Cara Maria intervened, it went bad. They admit that they get under one another's skin, and pretty much Laura goes too low with people, and Laura mentions that it's about the stuff that Cara Maria goes through in her real life. They both want this to be over, and Cara Maria doesn't care to do seasons with Laurel, but Laura doesn't want to do a season with Cara Maria. This part of the reunion starts off with discussion about the Vacation Alliance. Anissa, Tori, Josh, Casey, and Devin is the alliance, or the people that are on the season, and Johnny mentions that they picked up stragglers, but Devin is doing a pending investigation on some of the members, which is an internal investigation as well. People tell Josh to stop defending them, and Bananas defends Josh, mentioning that the mask, which is Jordan, being the biggest floater of the season. Devin mentions that Josh did not make a strong pitch to Rachel, and Rachel calls out their elitist gameplay, and trying to get Josh to turn against her, and Josh is crying from seeing all the comments that they made. Somehow this ends up with Josh and Bananas tag teaming Jordan, who was over-promising things to people, and Josh is hurt that Casey called him a liability. Josh mentions that people were mad in the prior round that he voted Corey into elimination, but nothing was changing Theo's mind. We see a clip of Laura and Josh hooking up. I do remember online where Laura mentioned that this happened, and Josh denied it online. So essentially, Josh lied on Laurel here. Bananas and Bananas' Angels is discussed, and Bananas mentioned that Tori created the Bananas Angels, where her turning on him caused this to happen, and Tori mentions that a man is not why the women did well, and it would have happened regardless. The focus on the woman is next, and Janae apologizes to her team about not having her head in the game, and for going through a lot of internal stuff, which none of it was really shown, so it's kind of confusing to us, the audience. She is also salty about the volunteering stuff, as she did not feel heard on her team, and Jordan and Devin push back on this, and Amanda mentions that it didn't make sense for Janae to self-nominate, where she's not in a good position on Era 3, and Janae wishes that she was on Era 2. Laurel throwing the challenge is called out, where Emily feels like she was thrown under the bus. Ryan and Laurel argue about throwing the challenge and how they are not doing well or whatever. And then Carmaria takes in on Laurel's poor performance in the mini final and quitting. We then move on to Tony and Avery stalemate, where Tony appears via the video call. He didn't know what he was doing and didn't think that Avery would call out his bluff, but it was too late to back out. He made a deal with the four nominees, and she mentioned that he did not bring her into any of those deals. They argue all about the semantics of it and how her people were Ryan and Derek, where they were going to save Tony, so she brought Tony into that deal apparently, but he didn't include her in any of his deals. The cast kind of calls him out for doing poorly in the elimination and going into elimination in the first place, and imagines that everyone knew that he wanted to go home. Tony is annoyed because he and her had a conversation about how, in their worst case scenario, they would be home before Easter. And he asks if this was the case, where Maria Menounos asks him if that's the case, and he freezes before he answers. So people kind of see this as confirmation. Most of the cast still thinks that he threw the elimination to go home, and Laura also calls him out for leaving early on All Stars 4. And I do remember there's commentary about how people from All Stars 4 believe that he left conveniently there for the appearance check as well. TJ comes in briefly and it's a very weird segment, so I'm kind of just going to move on. Rachel and Jordan are voted by the cast as the overall goat of their gender, and it seems like they just wanted to crown the winners, and Bananas is clearly visibly pissed off. But Jordan does give Bananas and CT his credit where they are better than him, according to Jordan. Amanda still thinks that Michelle is sneaky, and Michelle says that everyone did something sneaky on the show. Amanda mentions that Ashley and Nelson should have been on Era 3, especially over Avery, and Avery said that she was called and she accepted, which is true. If it wasn't Avery, it would have been someone else who replaced Ashley in the season, since they clearly just didn't want Ashley for this season for some reason. So Jordan is called out by some of the Era winners, but Anissa, where he states that all of them but Anissa came on the season to revive their challenge careers, and they've mentioned that they've done it for 20 years. And Derek is very mad because he states that Jordan takes breaks and comes back. Jordan mentions that he doesn't take 10 seasons off. And this was Jordan calling out Derek for wanting to be on the post 30-30 seasons, but never getting the call to actually be on. And it was a sign of production not really wanting him. Kara and Tori make up after all these years is discussed, and Tori talks about how Kara taught her the game on Dirty 30, that they became different, and Kara Maria was honest on this season. Bananas mentions that Jordan stole the proposal on World Wars 2 from Polly. This was just unnecessary from his case, and if this was the case, Polly and Cara Maria would have been engaged at some point in the 5 years since. Cara Maria gives Tori a pillow, which means two different things, and they all hug. So that concludes my thoughts on the season. It's fine, especially on a binge. There are definitely some memorable moments. The cast was great on paper, but they are mostly decent in execution. I think the Target's twist was fine for the first half, and I do think the first half of the season can hold its own. But if you noticed, the first half of the season took up like 2/3 of the review, and then I covered the second half of the season in like a half hour, so there really was just nothing going on in the second half. And I do think that the more boring people lasting caused this season to be more boring. And just the length of the season really just did itself no favors. So I'm going to do an Era 4 live, which I did videos for all the prior 3 eras discussing the starts, middle, and the ends of it, the pros, the cons, and all that. And I'm probably going to do another live on the future of the show now that Era 4 is done, and kind of predict where I think things are going and I am working on the era for men and women videos as I am recording this, so those should be out soon. But yeah, the main thing I'm going to do is the All-Star seasons. Obviously, All-Stars 5 or All-Stars Rivals is coming out on Wednesday. So while that's airing, I'm going to be going through the prior 4 All-Stars, so there'll be videos on those as well. So that's pretty much it. I really don't have much else to say. I'm probably going to rank the seasons at some point. I don't know when. Could be within the next few months, maybe later in the year. I have no idea if that's going to be a large process. I'm probably going to do the same thing I did with the Big Brother seasons, where I rank all the seasons regarding each category and then do an overall ranking. But there's 40 of these, so I don't know how that's going to work. Anyways, thank you all for following me on this journey, and I'll be back with something else soon. Bye!